But I think that in India, maybe instead of the exclusively one university, maybe the model that makes better sense would be that maybe a fund that focuses only on all the universities there, right? Like maybe it's not just IIT Madras alone, but maybe IIT Madras, IIC Bangalore, IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, IIT Kharagpur, IIT Kanpur together, maybe something like that, right? Or BITS as well. Actually, BITS is pretty significant in terms of creating companies as well. So maybe there's an opportunity to create a fund that's focused on that. But I think you need to see enough companies coming out of this ecosystem to create a fund, right?
Hi, wherever you're joining me, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to India Tech Reports in Conversation, a podcast bringing you insights from entrepreneurs, investors, industry leaders, and other stakeholders in India's deep tech and climate tech ecosystems. I'm Hari Arakli, and my guest today is Karthee Madasamy, founding managing partner at MFV Partners, a US-based early-stage deep tech-focused VC firm. In this episode, Karthee gives us a quick overview of MFV's new $25 million Harper Court Ventures Fund 1, a specialized vehicle bridging academic research and commercial viability for the deep tech startups coming out of the University of Chicago. He talks about how the fund addresses critical gaps in early-stage ecosystems through what he calls smart funding, meaning combining capital with hands-on operational support to translate lab breakthroughs into viable companies. The model focuses on high-impact sectors where University of Chicago holds world-class capabilities, including quantum computing, life sciences, energy, and artificial intelligence. Unlike traditional VC, the fund embeds itself in the university's innovation pipeline, collaborating with accelerators, tapping extensive alumni networks, and guiding startups from IP validation to Series A readiness. Early bets at the Harper Court Ventures Fund include Flow Medical, which is developing a next-generation catheter-based therapy to treat acute pulmonary embolism, SimCare AI, which is developing a platform for clinical skills training and evaluation, and Beacon, which is developing technology that eliminates viruses, bacteria, and molds from air and surfaces. In this conversation, Karthee also briefly discusses potential takeaways and best practices from partnerships such as the Harper Court Fund, which are not new in the US, for India's emerging deep tech ecosystem. Okay, so Karthee, thanks for doing this, and it's good to be talking to you again. And today's context is I wanted to bring our audience a little bit of insight into your thought process behind the Harper Court Ventures Fund 1. And I was basically curious about whether, and because it's a sort of a dedicated pre-seed fund in collaboration specifically with Chicago University, if I understand that right, I thought maybe there might be some interesting takeaways there, even for the Indian deep tech ecosystem. So I thought we can divide our conversation into two parts. Firstly, you could just walk us through the why and the how of Harper Court Ventures, how it came to be. And then we can sort of, in the second half, we can get into lessons from it, early takeaways for Indian entrepreneurs and VCs.
Right. So we are an early stage deep tech fund, MFV Partners, and we invest seed through Series A, all deep tech areas. And then the way we define deep tech is companies that have strong technology IP, and then the technology IP provides the main competitive advantage for the company. That's how we define it. And we've been looking at, should we get involved in the pre-seed stage? It's a different type of an asset class compared to the seed and A. And then we've been discussing with the University of Chicago. They have a bunch of deep tech accelerators. There are a bunch of programs that they have. But I think what they found was that there's a big missing gap in the Chicago ecosystem and University of Chicago ecosystem is that when somebody wants to translate their research into a company, when a lab that has an interesting breakthrough that want to convert that into a company, one of the biggest missing ingredients in the ecosystem was smart funding. Right? It's not just funding; it's smart funding. Right? What that means is that funding that understands, not just evaluates technology, evaluates companies, but also kind of help the process, help put a good team together, help provide the feedback in terms of, how do you build this company, bring syndicate partners, help the company understand what milestones should be hit to unlock the next round of financing, help that process, kind of help that kickstart this process, if you will. So good smart investors provide that beyond just the capital, and that's more required early on than maybe later on for a Series B or a Series C company. The expectation is not too much of that. But whereas if you're a pre-seed company and you're getting started, you're making every decisions, from hiring to figuring out a infrastructure platform to figuring out advisors and partners. I think an important active smart partner as an investor is important, and that was a big missing gap in Chicago and University of Chicago. So I think the university has been thinking about it for a while, and then we got engaged in that process maybe a couple of years ago. So the idea would be that it's an independent venture fund. So it is run by us. It's an independent venture fund, but we have a formal cooperation agreement with the university where this fund, Harper Court Ventures, which we went and raised money for, will invest only in the University of Chicago deep tech startups. The University of Chicago endowment anchored the fund. They provided funding, but we raised money from the rest of the other LPs to complete the $25 million. So the fund will invest in kind of pre-seed or formation stage companies that will come out of the University of Chicago ecosystem. What that means is that faculty members, postdocs, PhD students who are starting a deep tech startup based on the research there, based on some technology there, would be a fit for this company, for this fund. And then secondly, the university also runs few accelerators and an incubator. So companies that go through these accelerators and incubators will also be fair game for this fund. And then also alums, right? Alums, Chicago, University of Chicago alums are doing increasingly more deep tech startups, and then it is a fit for those are a fit for our fund as well, right? So why is this relevant or why is this important? If you really think about what made Silicon Valley, right, like if you go back 40, 50 years ago type of a thing, it really was, Silicon Valley was created by, people converting from research from Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, and other universities like that, right? So it's, the idea of startups were really from, somebody graduates a PhD in Stanford or MIT or Berkeley, and then they're saying, oh, look, I don't want to be in academia. I want to just take what I have done, the research, and then potentially convert it into a company. And that's how a lot of the companies got started as well, right? So the role of this university research driving the technology ecosystem is huge in the United States. There is so much funding that happens to the universities from the government, right? Which drives a lot of research. And then the idea was that how do you translate the research? And then some universities are very good at that. And then, but it is a common theme. You go to University of Michigan, you go to Carnegie Mellon, you go to University of Washington, you go to University of Texas, Austin. Every university is like, there is this, some part of the research will get translated into companies, and those companies get venture funded and whatnot, right? So the role of university research becoming startups and becoming technology companies is a huge thing, right? Google was started as was based on the research that Sergey and Larry did in Stanford, right? So there's a long-standing history of university research getting converted into companies. In fact, that's what drove Silicon Valley, right? So I think the idea would be to unlock some of the research, some of the capabilities that's happening in the University of Chicago ecosystem, and that's the goal of this fund.
And briefly, just to let the sort of an Indian audience know about the significance of the name. I was looking up Harper Court. It's a locally well-known development around the University of Chicago. Is that right? And that's the reason you've chosen this name?
Yeah, Harper was the first president of University of Chicago. And then Harper Court is a street in University of Chicago. That's where the entrepreneurship cell is and stuff like that. So yeah, so we just wanted to have some kind of connotation, some sort of significance to to the University of Chicago's famous president and also the streets there.
Can you now talk about some of the specifics in terms of how you expect this fund to work?
So we will invest 40 companies over the next 3-4 years, 3.5 years. And we'll invest in 4 different areas which are strengths of the university. One is quantum engineering or quantum computing. Second is energy and energy related startups. Third is life sciences, kind of health and devices, diagnostics, and some therapeutics as well. And then lastly, AI and data science. So these are 4 areas where the university is very strong at. There's a lot of research happening. There's a lot of PhD students there. So the focus will be on those areas. So this fund will invest in that first check, and then we'll also probably put together a syndicate or help put together a syndicate. If the company is trying to raise like maybe $1.5 million, $2 million, $1 million to get started, and the fund will invest a part of it, and then the fund will also help bring some other investors from the MFV ecosystem as well, right? So that's what we'll do, and then the MFV team from the Bay Area will help, but also we're going to have a person sitting in Chicago driving the day-to-day activities as well.
And will the university also take an equity stake in these startups?
Not for these investments. The university does not have like a separate equity taking mechanism. The fund will take equity. Only the fund will take equity for the investment we put in, right? But there are cases that the university has different programs. The university runs an accelerator, so the accelerator companies, they take equity and stuff like that. But I think for the investments we make, the fund will take the equity.
And they are not an LP in this fund, are they?
University of Chicago endowment is, like I said, the endowment of the University of Chicago is an LP. Yes.
Okay. So in that way, the university also benefits from. I mean, apart from of course seeing the entrepreneurship encouraged, they also stand to gain when one of these startups really makes it big.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. So, any early examples you can give us in terms of startups that you may have already invested in?
Yeah. When we announced last week, we said we have already done 3 investments. The 3 companies are already announced as part of our press release. There's a company called Flow Medical, which spun out of the university medical system. Is 2 faculty members plus a Chicago Booth alum. They are creating a new medical device for removing kind of clots using like a next generation technique. So that's the first company that we did. And then we have done an AI-based medical simulation company, generative AI-based medical simulation company. That's the second company. And then third one is it's also a health sciences company, which does kind of dynamic and kind of in-time detection of pathogens in the air and then kind of disinfecting them in human spaces. So not necessarily vacating the humans, but along with the humans, how do you disinfect some of these spaces? So those are the 3 companies we have done. We are working on a bunch more as well. So there's more announcements to come in the next quarter.
Anything that stands out to you in the University of Chicago sort of deep tech ecosystem that may be different from what you see in Silicon Valley? I mean, I don't know if the question makes sense, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, for example, the quantum stuff, right? Illinois and the University of Chicago are kind of leaders of the quantum ecosystem in the country. So recently, maybe last year now, Illinois put together a big quantum campus, and our portfolio company, PsiQuantum from the Bay Area, is an anchor tenant now. They're going to put a quantum computer there. They're going to have research there. And then between University of Illinois and University of Chicago, they actually graduate more quantum PhDs than the rest of the country. And then the governor of Illinois has put a big effort to kind of make Chicago as the kind of the head of as a center for the quantum excellence in the country. So in terms of the quantum computing, quantum sensing, and in general quantum engineering, the university has actually significant strengths compared to other areas, including the Bay Area. So we're basically leaning on some of those things, and then similarly on the health sciences side, the biological department, sciences department in University of Chicago is very well renowned, including a lot of Nobel laureates as well. And then, the University of Chicago medical system, the hospital system, which sits right next to the biological sciences department. Some of the breakthroughs that they get is significant, so leaning onto some of those things as well. So those are some of the things that are, very, very, very unique and distinctive. But also you have to remember, like the Manhattan Project of the first atom bomb, came from University of Chicago, right? So the physics department in University of Chicago is pretty strong. And University of Chicago also runs the two national labs, Argonne National Lab and Fermi National Lab. Those two do a lot of, significant amount of research along energy, along quantum computing, other physics areas. So those are all unique stuff. Those are all like the IP that's getting created in the ecosystem is significantly promising. So that's the strength. Those are the strengths of the university and the university ecosystem, and that's what we're basically betting on.
Okay, so now I want to switch to what lessons we can take away that VCs can maybe try and replicate in India in their partnerships with higher schools of learning. Of course, a fair amount of that is happening now compared with earlier. Maybe in terms of best practices, what comes to your mind in terms of how this experience has been a success so far?
Yeah, no. So first of all, what we're doing with University of Chicago is not new, right? Like, Berkeley has this thing called Berkeley Skydeck. MIT has this thing called MIT Engine. Michigan has this thing called Accelerate Blue Fund. Caltech has this thing. So there's a bunch of different universities have similar kind of programs, similar approaches and stuff like that, right? Which are all basically a venture fund to kind of support that ecosystem, right? And universities spinning out companies as US has a long history. India has a long, long way to go, right? So, in India, the concept of companies spinning out of these universities or the government funding to drive some of these research that can be potentially translated. We are way behind. It's not, it's not even a comparison, right? Like I think European ecosystems like maybe Oxford, Cambridge, ETH, even they feel they're behind the US. And India is like way behind even those ecosystems, right? So India is like way behind, right? And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Also, the faculty in these institutions, whether it is IISc or IIT, are probably not necessarily, either focused or incentivized to actually create companies. They are incentivized to just do research and maybe write papers. Whereas, in the U.S. universities, it is actually encouraged. There are significant amount of set up to translate this research into potentially a company as well, right? So I think the infrastructure, the mindset, the DNA, the incentive structure is all much better in US, and then the other ecosystems are starting to catch up. India probably still has few ways to go. But I'm sure IISc and IITs are starting the process, right? There's more efforts. I remember compared to like maybe 10, 15 years ago, there's more efforts now in terms of not focusing only on paper writing and then, maybe translational stuff, or if they want to take a sabbatical to go run a company, all those things are being encouraged now. There are more setups being put together, but I think there's still a long ways to go.
But in terms of a VC firm sort of exclusively partnering a university on a specific fund or a program, are you aware of any such initiatives in India? I mean, other VC firms, have you come across news, or in your network, have you heard about VC firms doing something with maybe IIT Madras, which in India is currently the best known in terms of creating an ecosystem for startups, and now IISc is picking up?
Yeah, I think yeah, you're right. IISc, IIT Madras, are probably the leaders in this thing. I think at this point there's not an exclusive fund. I don't think, but I have seen some efforts happening for the IIT Madras. But I don't know whether it has whether it has kind of formalized or not, or whether it has come to fruition or not. But I think in India, maybe instead of the exclusively one university, maybe the model that makes better sense would be that maybe a fund that focuses only on all the universities there, right? Like maybe it's not just IIT Madras alone, but maybe IIT Madras, IISc Bangalore, IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, IIT Kharagpur, IIT Kanpur together, maybe something like that, right? Or BITS as well. Actually, BITS is pretty significant in terms of creating companies as well. So maybe there's an opportunity to create a fund just focused on that. But I think you need to see enough companies coming out of this ecosystem to create a fund, right? Like whereas with the University of Chicago, we are already seeing there's like almost 100 plus companies that are already formed that are in the process of kind of raising their pre-seed. So there is a healthy pipeline of investment opportunities for us, right? So we need to make sure those exist in India before there's a concept of a dedicated fund just for that, right? I think right now, if you talk to many of the early stage VCs in India, they're all working with IIT Madras, they're all working with IISc Bangalore, especially if they're a deep tech fund, right? So.
Any other points that you want to talk about? I mean, I was also curious about whether at MFV, have you looked at Indian deep tech startups more recently? Any sectors that you think that are promising? Any companies that you think are promising?
Yeah, no, I think like I was there a few months ago, and obviously we have Athi Motors and Sun Mobility in India. So from us in our portfolio. I saw a lot more efforts happening. So there was an effort around robotics put together by IISc. So there's a kind of a space for robotic startups to come in and work on it and whatnot. And then I heard there are like 10 different or 15 different such setups where there's a partnership with an university that is a focus on creating good technology companies. So I do think that there's significant efforts that are happening in India on deep tech, and then even recently the minister made news for saying we should be investing in deep tech. Looks like there's even from the government perspective there is a lot of at least focus and intent to go create companies in deep tech. So we're definitely seeing a lot more activity, and then we're definitely seeing a lot more interest. So and I think like in the last maybe couple of years, we have seen like several funds that have come up as well, from including Yali and others, which are deep tech focused funds, new funds that are that are funding in deep tech. So I think the ecosystem is definitely growing significantly, and I think it'll continue to grow. And I think I've told this to other people before. Like if you are to close your eyes and then wake up 10 years later, and if you looked at what was one of the biggest sectors in the previous 10 years, waking up 10 years from now, it will be deep tech will be one of the areas in India. So I do think the next 10 years there's interesting deep tech companies that'll come into existence, because there's definitely a lot of activity starting to happen, and over the next 10 years, I definitely expect India to be a prominent ecosystem for deep tech startups.
I'm not going to push you to name any companies, but can you say if you're in talks or if you're close to investing any new deep tech companies in India?
No, I can't say all that. And but there are interesting stuff happening around robotics. There are interesting stuff happening around vision and sensors. There are interesting stuff happening around materials. There are interesting stuff happening around computing, semiconductor stuff. So yeah, let me leave it at that. Yeah.
That's it for today. You can find the link to MFV's recent announcement of the new fund in the description of this episode. For my daily pick of headlines on topics like these, do check out India Tech Report, a daily morning bulletin. And if you'd like to support my work, please just follow this podcast wherever you listen to it. You can also subscribe to my daily newsletter, India Tech Report, for everything in one place. I'm Harper Court. Thank you for listening.